Welcome to Daryl's Beekeeping Videos. I'm a master beekeeper, and today's lesson is on personal protective equipment that you will need for when you are doing hive management, hive inspections, things like that. I'll briefly talk about the personal protective equipment that you might want to consider getting when you're doing pest management, such as varroa mite treatments, but the specific personal protective equipment that you will need for each type of pesticide will be included in that video when I produce videos. For example, if you watch my video on oxalic acid uses and the various methods of using oxalic acid, I talk about the personal protective equipment that's required by the Environmental Protective Agency when you use oxalic acid, either the drip, the spray, or the vaporizing, or we call it sublimation method. So I'll briefly talk about that, but again, the majority of this video will be about the personal protective equipment that you're going to use for hive management. So for personal protective equipment that's used for pest management, such as varroa mite treatments, you should always follow the product labels. And again, in the final video, I'll have still pictures of this in the final product for you to see, but always follow the product label. When they test the pesticides, they go through a rigorous process to test the pesticide effectiveness. They also have to submit what requirements are for personal protective equipment that's to be used when using the pesticides. So always, the EPA says you should always follow the product label. So you'll find the product label either on the outside of the package, or a lot of times the manufacturer will have a handout that also goes with the package. And again, it will tell you how to use the pesticide and what personal protective equipment you use. If you're looking into equipment and you don't know what to get, as a general rule of thumb, the more caustic type of pesticides, oxalic acid, Formic Pro, formic acid, those type things generally require some type of goggles and at a minimum a half-face respirator with a particulate filter on them. They also require some kind of acid-resistant gloves, such as nitrile gloves, rubber gloves, or anything that's acid-resistant. I personally use, instead of buying the half face mask with particulate filters and goggles, I simply spent the extra $20, $30, whatever it was, and I bought a full-face mask as well as the required particulate filter off of Amazon. I find it much more handy to use the two pieces of equipment, as well as covering up my head to keep from being stung. So if you're starting off, I'd consider getting a full face respirator, a mask with the particulate respirator filters. The other thing I'll briefly talk about is personal protective equipment is a good smoker. I have a separate video on how to light a smoker where I talk about the various smokers. Again, I'll have a photo with the different types of smokers. But when you get a smoker, get one that has this protective wire mesh around it. That is a heat shield to keep you from burning your hands. So again, good tool to have for personal protective equipment. This is a 4-inch diameter by 7-inch tall smoker. They also make a 4x10 smoker, so you don't have to put as much fuel in. I personally prefer this 4x7. All right, so getting on to what personal protective equipment you need when you're doing hive management. What equipment you need is going to depend on your comfort level of being around the bees. And if you've had any previous medical conditions. For example, I was highly burned years ago, so I can't stand honeybees or any bees crawling on my hands, so I always wear some type of gloves. I also know beekeepers that don't wear any personal protective equipment at all. As a master beekeeper, I always recommend to all my students that at a very minimum, you wear some type of veil to protect your eyes, because if you get stung in the eyes, you got a serious medical problem right off the bat. So at a bare minimum, you can buy one of those little mosquito head nets for like $5 from Walmart or any kind of sporting store, and use that to protect your eyes. You can also use, at your local bee store, you can get a veil with a rigid hat like this. Again, I'll have a still video with the different gear, but so you can see it from afar. But again, I love this hat with the built-in veil, and it has securing straps that go underneath my armpits. I'll use this if I'm going and opening a hive, mostly if I'm filling the hive top feeder or briefly lifting up to see what the brood pattern is. I usually use this a lot. You can get it with a rigid hat, or you can get one with a collapsible hat, such as I have on my suit here. You can see it just folds down. Again, you can get them like this. When you buy suits, they come in a couple different styles. They come in a solid material, solid cloth, and they come in a ventilated setup, either as a just a jacket or pants or a full suit. And you'll see, again, in the still photo, you'll be able to see the actual ventilation portion of this. I highly encourage you to get a ventilated suit or a ventilated jacket. If you're just starting off and you don't have a whole lot of money, consider getting a ventilated jacket and gloves at a minimum, as well as the ventilated jacket will come with a veil. The reason you want to get a ventilated system versus a solid material is the solid material is hot. You'll really appreciate the ventilated system. It's not that much more expensive than the solid material. When you're out inspecting in warm weather, you get hot in this solid material quickly. And again, if you're just starting off, get a ventilated jacket, either with the full round type of hat, or as I like the traditional hat that folds out like this. Simply, that's just my personal preference, simply because it allows a little bit more light to come in through the top, even though I use a flashlight whenever I'm trying to spot the eggs. But get a ventilated jacket, and then if you want to go back later and get pants, you can buy the pants separately. And then I just bought a pair of suspenders off of Amazon to help hold them up a little bit. They come with these little pull strings, but again, they're kind of a pain in the tush to use. So I just use the suspenders when I use them. Again, you can go back and get these later. I've yet to find any ventilated pants just by themselves. I'm sure they exist. I just haven't found them yet. So again, I just got the solid pattern pants, and then ventilated jacket, and then pants later if you choose at a minimum. And then you want to get a good pair of goat skin gloves. They do make a cowhide leather gloves, but they're really rigid and they're getting harder to find nowadays. Most of your bee suppliers are going to sell these goat skin gloves. And again, they have ventilated and unventilated. Ventilated means it just has these little ventilation areas right next to the wrist. It really doesn't matter if you get the ventilated gloves. It doesn't make that much of a difference. But again, you do want to get a ventilated jacket or preferably a full ventilated suit. When you buy your jackets or your suits, I highly encourage you to go to your local bee supplier and test fit them there and actually purchase it. So that way you give them back to the local community. You're going to find that the bee suits and the bee jackets aren't that much more price difference at your local bee supplier as opposed to the big box bee stores. And the beauty of it is you're giving back to your local community supplier, and you can try it on. When you get a jacket or a suit, especially if you're getting a full suit, you want to try it on to see what fits and how much leg room and armpit room that you have. What I recommend is you get a size, or preferably 2 sizes, larger than what you typically wear, so that when you go out in slightly cooler weather, you can layer up a little bit and then still have the freedom of movement. For example, I normally wear an XL, and in my full suit, I've got, I think it's a triple XL. And then in my jacket, it's a double XL. And the reason I got the triple XL in the suit is simply because the space between my groin and my shoulders, it allows me, when I'm riding around on my golf cart moving bee equipment around, it allows me a little bit more maneuver space inside my suit, so to speak. So again, you have to play with what works for you. Again, go to your local bee supplier and get that. Next thing I want to talk about is when you get your equipment, how to maintain it. So when you buy these suits or the jackets, I highly recommend, again, that you get it from your local bee supplier, because occasionally you will tear these veils and your local bee supplier will have a replacement veil that you can buy locally, or they'll have a repair kit that you can use to put over top of the veil, over top the mesh, or you can simply sew it up like I've done a couple times. When you clean your suit, the instructions are going to say you should take off the hood and then wash the hood separately or by hand, and then you can wash the jacket in the washing machine. What I've typically done is I usually buy one of those little mesh bags off of Amazon or any other local store, and I'll simply put the veil in it or the whole suit in that, and then wash it in my washing machine, realizing there's a slight chance I could get a torn veil, but in all the years I've been beekeeping, I've only had 1 or 2 veils that get a small tear, so it's not that big a deal, but the instructions actually say to hand wash it. So that's all I've got. This is a short video on equipment to use. So as a recap, always, when you're doing pest management, always follow the product label. It'll tell you exactly what type of material, personal protective equipment you have to use. Again, it's typically some type of eye protection, a filtered mask with particulate filter if you're using oxalic acid or formic acid, some kind of nitrile gloves or acid protective gloves, and they're always going to tell you, all of them are going to tell you long sleeve shirt and long pants, as well as shoes and socks. And then for hive management, again, at a very minimum, get a veil of some sort, whether it be one of those mosquito nets or a hat of some sort with a built-in veil. And then from there, you can get preferably a ventilated jacket. You'll appreciate it. And then later on, you can go back and get a pair of pants, or if you're going straight off the bat, just go with a full bee suit. But again, go to your local bee supply. So that is my video on equipment. I hope you learned something, and thank you for watching.